Three shots echoed across the canyon. Jack Morrison dropped behind his black quarter horse. Colt's single-action army clearing leather in one fluid motion. The Apache girl stumbled out of the cordite smoke, clutching a bloody map to her chest. This wasn't his fight, until she collapsed at his boots with a 4470 slug through her shoulder. The morning had started peaceful enough. Jack was branding cattle on his spread, working a cherry red iron against cowhide under the merciless Arizona sun. At 42, he carried the weathered look of a man who'd learned to value quiet moments between storms. The puckered scar on his left knuckle told stories he kept locked away. But in territorial Arizona, peace was always borrowed time. His stallion Ranger, a coal-black quarter horse bred for speed and stamina, caught the scent of trouble first. Ears cocked forward, nostrils flaring, Jack had learned to trust the animal's battlefield instincts during his cavalry days. When Ranger got spooked, experienced men reached for iron. The gunfire shattered desert silence like artillery rounds. Three precise shots from military Springfield rifles, followed by the sharper reports of civilian weapons. Jack counted muzzle flashes through his field glasses, at least a dozen mounted men pursuing a single rider across the hardscrabble terrain. She materialized through the heat shimmer like a warrior spirit, Apache by her beaded buckskin dress and the way she rode, low against her pony's neck, reading the landscape like a tactical map. Young, maybe 25, but moving with the lethal confidence of someone raised in constant warfare. Dark blood stained her shoulder where a government bullet had found its mark. Behind her, dust plumes marked the pursuit. Armed riders in mixed blue military wool and civilian gear. Professional soldiers maintaining formation discipline even at full gallop. This wasn't random border violence. Jack Morrison had spent 5 years trying to forget he'd ever pinned on a badge. The corruption scandal that destroyed his sheriffing career in Tombstone had cost him everything. His position, his reputation, his belief that law meant anything in a territory run by men with gold fever. Now he raised Hereford cattle on 800 acres of prime grazing land and minded his own business. He'd sworn off playing hero. Heroes filled shallow graves, but some codes run deeper than self-preservation. The girl reached his fence line as her painted pony stumbled, arterial blood spraying from a neck wound. She rolled clear with practiced ease, came up running on foot toward his ranch house. Jack vaulted the corral rails, his cavalry boots hitting packed earth as she collapsed against his stone water trough. Up close, he could see keen intelligence burning in her obsidian eyes despite pain and exhaustion. This wasn't some lost traveler. This woman had command presence. "Please," she gasped in unaccented English, pressing a leather document case into his hands. "They cannot have this. Many innocents die if they succeed." Jack opened the case with deliberate care. Inside lay a hand-drawn survey map marked with Apache symbols and territorial government notations, gold deposits, water rights, sacred burial grounds. The kind of strategic document that triggered wars between federal forces and tribal nations. "Who might you be, miss?" "Ayanna, daughter of Chief Red Wolf of the Chiricahua Apache. This map documents our gold deposits. My father intended it as peace offering to territorial authorities, but Colonel Brass seeks it for personal enrichment." Jack's blood turned to winter. Colonel Ezra Brass. That name carried the bitter taste of unfinished business. The pursuit crested his ridge. A dozen hard-case riders in surplus military equipment. Leading them sat Brass himself, 50 years old and still wearing his blue colonel's uniform, despite being drummed out of regular service for war profiteering. The man commanded his mount like he owned the entire territory. "Morrison!" Brass's voice cut across the valley like a cavalry saber. "I know you've got the Apache and my legal property. Send her out peaceful like, and maybe you keep drawing breath." Jack helped Ayanna to her feet, noting how she favored her wounded shoulder, while keeping her gun hand mobile. Intelligent woman. Her fingers rested near a bone-handled Arkansas toothpick, and her balanced stance indicated blade proficiency. Your legal property? Jack called back, buying time to assess defensive options. Last I heard, theft from peaceful tribes was still federal crime, even for cashiered officers. Brass's laughter grated like grinding millstones. Federal crime? Son, I represent federal authority out here. You've got 30 seconds to consider your position. Jack studied the survey map again, then examined the young Apache woman beside him. Every survival instinct demanded he hand her over, send her away, return to his cattle and his carefully maintained anonymity, but the scarred knuckle on his gun hand throbbed with old pain, a reminder of another day when he'd chosen duty over safety. Miss, you familiar with firearms? Ayana's smile was sharp as tempered steel. More familiar than most cavalry troopers. Jack drew his backup Colt from his belt, a nickel-plated peacemaker with custom ivory grips. He checked the cylinder, 6 rounds of .45 long Colt, each cartridge loaded with 40 grains of black powder. Sufficient stopping power to anchor a cavalry horse. Then let's educate the colonel about territorial hospitality. The assault developed in textbook fashion. Brass deployed half his force around the barn's left flank, while leading the remaining 6 in frontal attack. Classic military hammer and anvil tactics, executed with professional competence. But Jack Morrison had absorbed hard lessons during his law enforcement career. His opening shot erupted from behind the stone water trough, the heavy Colt bucking against his palm. The .45 slug struck Brass's point rider dead center, punching through his sternum and dropping him from the saddle like a sack of grain. The man hit Desir hardpan and lay still. Jack's follow-up shots came with metronomic precision, his thumb working the single-action hammer like a practiced craftsman. 2 more attackers tumbled from their mounts before they could return effective fire. Ayana flowed across the battleground like liquid mercury. She gained the barn wall in 3 graceful bounds, Arkansas toothpick gleaming in one hand, while the backup Colt thundered in the other. Her blade opened an attacker's carotid in a crimson spray, while her gunfire dropped 2 more riders with surgical accuracy. I don't require rescuing, lawman, she called over the weapon's fire. I require combat allies. The survivors withdrew in disorder, abandoning 5 corpses in Jack's ranch yard. Brass cursed from the ridgeline, but possessed too much tactical sense to squander additional men on unsuccessful frontal assault. This doesn't conclude here, Morrison, he bellowed across the distance. I'll return with full territorial militia. You cannot evade federal justice. You ceased representing federal justice when they stripped your commission, Jack shouted back, ejecting spent brass and reloading with automatic efficiency. As acrid smoke dispersed on the evening breeze, Jack holstered his weapon and evaluated his unexpected ally. Ayana was conducting ammunition inventory with professional thoroughness, dark eyes scanning the horizon for additional threats. You have personal history with him, she observed, statement, not inquiry. The massacre at Copper Creek. I was serving as junior deputy when Brass ordered unprovoked attack on a peaceful Apache camp. Attempted to prevent the slaughter, got cashiered for refusing illegal orders. Ayana's expression transformed to granite hardness. My younger brother perished at Copper Creek, standing bare, 14 summers old. Jack met her gaze without wavering. I failed to save him, should have acted more decisively. You attempted intervention when others remained silent. Honor exists in the attempt. She examined the survey map again. But immediate threats demand attention. If Brass obtains this document, he'll provoke tribal warfare to seize our gold fields for personal profit. Jack reloaded his Colt and returned it to leather. The colonel would return with overwhelming force. That represented his standard methodology. Next engagement would offer no quarter. Then we'd better ensure he doesn't acquire it. Jack's ranch house had been constructed by a prudent man who understood frontier survival requirements. The thick adobe walls could deflect rifle rounds, and the windows were proportioned for defensive firing positions rather than scenic views. Inside, Ayana examined his weapons collection while Jack maintained his firearms and developed defensive strategy. Former cavalry officer, she noted, studying his campaign ribbons and discharge documentation. Jack worked a bronze cleaning rod through his rifle barrel. 7th Cavalry Regiment, 3-year enlistment, followed by 2 years as Sheriff of Tombstone. What terminated your law enforcement career? Discovered the mayor and town council embezzling silver mine revenues. When I initiated prosecution, they fabricated identical charges against me. Jack inspected his rifle bore for fouling. Apparently, honest sheriffs created inconvenience in corrupt municipalities. Ayana nodded understanding. Systemic corruption motivated my father's negotiation attempts. Surrender our gold to prevent warfare. But I recognized men like Brass would never achieve satisfaction. Jack secured his Winchester Model 1873 and approached his gun safe. Behind the visible weapons lay his true arsenal: military surveys, ammunition reserves, and tactical equipment from his Army service. If we're establishing defensive positions, we execute proper planning. He spread territorial maps across his oak table. Brass will return with maximum available force. We require tactical advantages. Ayana studied the maps, her strategic mind immediately comprehending their situation. What numbers can he deploy? 20 to 30 regulars, combination of military deserters, claim jumpers, and professional gunfighters, plus whatever official military support he can obtain. Jack marked positions with spent cartridge cases. Advantageous news: this facility was designed for siege warfare. He demonstrated the concealed firing ports, underground ammunition storage, and escape tunnels carved into bedrock foundation. The previous owner had been a Confederate veteran who understood that in Apache territory, you prepared for extended combat or died quickly. Excellent defensive engineering, Ayana acknowledged, tracing gun ports disguised as decorative elements. But numerical superiority remains with our enemies. Numbers don't guarantee victory in defensive warfare. Jack retrieved his signal mirror, angling it toward the afternoon sun. Observe this communication. He transmitted coded heliograph messages toward distant Tucson. 3 long flashes, 2 short, 3 long repeated. Military protocol, requesting his associate Murphy monitor telegraph traffic for troop movement orders. Response arrived within minutes. Returned signals that created tension in Jack's jaw muscles. What intelligence? Ayana inquired. Complete cavalry patrol. 40 mounted troopers under Lieutenant Hayes. Arrival expected before sunset. Jack struck the table with his fist. Brass convinced them you're a kidnapped Army courier. Now we're engaging the United States military. For the first time since their meeting, Ayana displayed genuine concern. My people cannot sustain warfare against the entire army. If this conflict escalates, escalation won't occur if we maintain intelligence. Jack's voice carried the authority of his badge-wearing years. But I require absolute truth. Why did your father really send you with this survey? Ayana gazed toward Apache lands for extended moments before responding. He didn't dispatch me. Jack turned deliberately. Clarify that statement. Father plans surrendering the map as peace offering. Relinquish our gold to terminate hostilities. Her hands formed fists. But I've witnessed how these treaties conclude. They seize our gold, then demand our water, take our water, then require our children for mission schools. So you stole it to prevent the surrender. I intended destruction, burn it so no white man could locate our sacred places. She met his gaze. Then I conceived another strategy. Deliver it to honorable Army officers, men who respect their commitments. Jack studied her expression, recognizing steel beneath beauty. This wasn't some desperate refugee. This was a war chief's daughter executing strategic decisions for her people's survival. You have specific candidates in mind? General William Tecumseh Sherman, only Army commander who's maintained faith with Apache treaty obligations. Before Jack could respond, rhythmic hoofbeats echoed across the valley. But this wasn't Brass's irregular force. This represented military formation advancing in regulation order. Jack employed his field glasses to study the newcomers. 40 mounted soldiers in regulation blue, commanded by a young lieutenant with nervous bearing, but honest demeanor. Behind them rode Colonel Brass, like territorial royalty. Among the colonel's civilian companions, one rider attracted Jack's attention. A lean man in trail-worn clothing who displayed excessive alertness and professional bearing for a common drifter. Something about his posture suggested military intelligence training and active surveillance operations. "Time has expired," Jack muttered. He addressed Ayanna. "Whatever statements I make during negotiations, support my position and maintain combat readiness." The cavalry deployed with regulation precision. Lieutenant Hayes dismounted and approached the house, his hand positioned on his saber hilt, without drawing the weapon. "Jack Morrison, this is Lieutenant Hayes, 7th Cavalry Regiment. You're commanded to surrender the Apache woman and return stolen military documents." Jack emerged onto his porch, hands visible but positioned for rapid weapon deployment. "Lieutenant, I'm former Sheriff Morrison of Tombstone. The woman you seek is under my protection as a witness to federal crimes." "Fabrications!" Brass spurred his mount forward. "The squaw stole Army property. Morrison's harboring a federal criminal." "Indeed," Jack's voice projected across the yard. "Then explain the Copper Creek incident to the lieutenant colonel. Describe how many Apache children died for your gold acquisition schemes." Hayes looked between the two men, uncertainty developing across his features. "Colonel Brass, what massacre is he referencing?" "Delusions of a disgraced lawman," Brass snarled. "Morrison was cashiered for corruption. Nothing he says merits credibility." "Corruption?" Jack's laughter contained no amusement. "Lieutenant, examine territorial records. I was relieved for refusing to falsify evidence in Colonel Brass's mining fraud investigations." The young officer's grip tightened on his weapon. Competent officers pursued questions before initiating violence. Incompetent ones followed orders without consideration. "Colonel," Hayes said carefully, "perhaps we should conduct private discussion." The rifle shot originated from shadows beyond the cavalry formation. One of Brass's concealed marksmen losing patience with diplomatic negotiations. The bullet sparked off Hayes's saber scabbard, and suddenly everyone was reaching for weapons. "Sufficient delay!" Brass drew his service revolver. "Arrest them!" But as the colonel's gun cleared leather, the alert civilian among his party fired a Winchester round that clipped Brass's right shoulder, spinning him sideways in his saddle. The lean stranger stepped into lantern light, smoking rifle in his hands and a federal badge visible on his vest. "Army intelligence," he announced to the stunned cavalry. "I've been conducting undercover investigation of Brass's organization for 8 months, documenting illegal weapons trafficking and treaty violations." The ranch yard transformed into battlefield chaos as allegiances shifted and firearms blazed in gathering twilight. But Jack Morrison had survived worse odds during his cavalry service. His weapon found his grip like greeting a trusted friend. Brass recovered quickly from his shoulder wound, adrenaline and fury overriding pain. His revolver swung toward Ayanna with murderous intent. Time slowed as Jack's Colt cleared leather, the weight of the peacemaker settling into his palm like destiny fulfilled. "Brass!" The colonel turned at Jack's challenge, their eyes meeting across decades of unfinished business and spilled innocent blood. "This is for standing bear." Jack's shot struck Brass center mass, the heavy .45 slug punching through wool and flesh to shatter the corrupt officer's spine. Brass pitched backward from his saddle, his unfired revolver clattering across desert hardpan. Battle smoke drifted away on evening wind, carrying with it the spirit of a 14-year-old Apache boy who died for one man's greed. The gunfire was fading when Lieutenant Hayes approached Jack, his youthful face solemn in the flickering lamplight. "Mr. Morrison, Agent Crawford has presented documentation that substantiates your accusations against Colonel Brass. It appears he was operating completely outside military authority." Jack holstered his Colt and gazed down at the corpse sprawled in his ranch yard. Ezra Brass lay crumpled in blood-darkened dust, his stolen uniform bearing witness to decades of corruption and violence. No satisfaction accompanied the killing, only weary acknowledgement that justice sometimes demanded terrible costs. "Truth eventually surfaces, Lieutenant. Requires the proper catalyst." Agent Crawford emerged from the tactical confusion, carrying a leather evidence case. "Lieutenant, we've secured sufficient documentation to prosecute Brass's entire criminal enterprise. Illegal weapon sales to Mexican revolutionaries, forged territorial land grants, deliberate incitement to tribal violence. This survey map," he displayed the Apache document, "represents no stolen military property. It's a diplomatic offering from Chief Red Wolf." Hayes examined the blood-stained map by lantern illumination, beginning to comprehend the magnitude of events he'd witnessed. "Agent Crawford, what's your official recommendation regarding disposition?" "The woman requires immediate escort to Washington. Let her present this directly to the Secretary of War, potentially President Grant himself." Crawford regarded Ayanna with genuine respect. What the Apache Nation offers here represents authentic opportunity for lasting territorial peace, but it must proceed through proper governmental channels. Ayanna stepped forward, her bearing dignified despite torn clothing and makeshift shoulder bandage. "I accept this arrangement with gratitude. My father dispatched me to locate honorable soldiers within the Army. It appears the spirits provided accurate guidance." Lieutenant Hayes straightened, suddenly comprehending the historical weight settling upon his shoulders. "Ma'am, it would be my distinct honor to provide safe escort." We depart at sunrise. As the cavalry established night security perimeter, Jack found himself alone with Ayanna on his porch. Desert stars wheeled overhead in their eternal patterns, indifferent to human struggles below. She seated herself beside him on worn wooden steps, comfortable in frontier silence. "Your people will compose songs about this day," she said finally. "Brass earned his death, required considerable time, but accounts got balanced. Not merely Brass, you." She studied his profile in starlight. "Today you remembered your true identity, the lawman who stands between predators and innocent people." Jack considered her observation. For years, he'd convinced himself he was finished with badge wearing, finished caring about anything beyond his own property. But when the critical moment arrived, his conscience had chosen sides without hesitation. "Perhaps I was simply exhausted from running." "Running!" Ayanna's voice carried the authority of ancestral generations. "In my father's lodge, warriors speak of the white lawman who stood with the people when his own kind demanded betrayal. That's not retreat. That's honor." A hard-ridden horse approached from town, its rider swaying with exhaustion from urgent travel. Murphy, Jack's former deputy, dismounted and approached with a yellow telegraph message. "Jack, priority communication arrived through territorial headquarters, marked urgent federal priority." Jack unfolded the telegram and read by flickering lamplight. His expression shifted from resignation toward something approaching hope. "What news?" Ayanna inquired. "Official appointment as United States Marshal for Arizona Territory. Agent Crawford's report completely cleared my service record. They want me to reorganize territorial law enforcement." Jack looked up from the document. "Beginning with the Deadwood Gold Camp crisis. Will you accept the position?" Jack remained silent for extended moments, listening to night sounds across the desert. Somewhere in the darkness, more men like Brass were scheming, harming innocent people for personal profit. And elsewhere, young officers like Hayes were attempting to serve honorably within a system that didn't always reward integrity. Haven't worn a badge for 5 years, he said finally. Swore I'd never pin one on again. And now? Jack stood and walked to the porch edge, surveying his ranch property. Good land. Peaceful land. A place where a man could raise cattle and live quietly for his remaining years. But peace was a luxury some people couldn't afford. A man must stand for something meaningful. Might as well be justice. At dawn, Lieutenant Hayes's patrol formed up in the dusty ranch yard with military precision. Ayanna had exchanged her torn buckskin for a proper traveling dress from Jack's deceased wife's wardrobe, appearing every inch a diplomat prepared to speak for her nation in Washington's political corridors. As she mounted her horse, a quality cavalry remount Hayes had provided, she paused and regarded Jack. The eagle remembers those who soar with honor, Marshal. Fly fair and strike true. She reached into her medicine pouch and withdrew a single golden eagle feather, its tip marked with sacred red paint. The gift of a warrior acknowledging another warrior's courage. Jack accepted it with appropriate solemnity. May your path be straight and your enemies reveal themselves clearly, he replied in careful Apache, words learned during better times when peace seemed achievable. Lieutenant Hayes called his formation to attention. 40 horses turned east toward the territorial capital, carrying with them a survey map that might prevent warfare and a young woman who bore her people's hopes for cultural survival. Jack watched until they disappeared into morning heat shimmer. Then he returned to his house and opened the gun safe one final time. His old marshal's badge lay in a small wooden box, tarnished but unbroken by years of exile. As he pinned the star to his vest, it reflected sunlight streaming through his window. The familiar authority felt like returning home after a long journey through moral darkness. Outside, Murphy waited with fresh horses and traveling equipment. The old deputy's weathered face showed approval as he noted the badge. Ready for Deadwood, Marshal? Jack Morrison swung up onto Ranger's back. The black stallion pranced beneath him, sensing his rider's renewed purpose. Somewhere ahead lay fresh challenges, new opportunities to stand between predators and their intended victims. Been ready for 5 years, Murphy. Just required time to remember the code. They rode north toward whatever justice awaited in the gold camps and boom towns of the frontier. Behind them, the ranch sat quiet in desert sun, awaiting its owner's eventual return. But Jack Morrison had rediscovered something essential in battle smoke and bloodshed. Some principles run deeper than personal comfort. Some fights demand good men willing to stand and deliver. And sometimes a man becomes exactly who he was meant to be only when he stops evading his own conscience. The marshal's star caught light one final time as he rode toward whatever challenges awaited. Justice was back on the trail, and the frontier was about to become a more lawful place. In the distance, a red-tailed hawk circled high above the desert, its cry echoing across the vastness like approval from the spirits themselves. The code had been honored, balance had been restored, and somewhere in the territorial capital, a young Apache woman carried hope for peace between two worlds that had forgotten how to trust. But that's a story for another day. Today, Jack Morrison had remembered who he was meant to be, and the West was about to discover what justice looked like when good men refused to back down. The legend was just beginning.